So, episode 4, do buyers and journalists actually like Ford? Do they dislike Ford? Do they like Ford? There's a bit of mixed information out there, and it depends on the time of year and whether a new model has popped up or whether it's been out for a year. But a lot of this has to do with getting views, making money. So let's talk about journalists, customers, owners. Do they really like Ford? Let's talk about recalls, awards, and sales. So let's get straight into this. There's a lot of people that, you could say temporarily don't like Ford because really popular models like the Ford Bronco and Ford Maverick have had really long waits for them. Now remember, every single journalist, when the Ford Maverick came out and the Ford Bronco came out, they're saying this is the best thing since sliced bread. But that's kind of what journalists do. When they know a model has a fan base already, that people are excited to hear about a new model, they just go on about how incredible it is, and they don't point out any negative points, which I find is rough because then people throw down deposits at dealerships, and some dealerships, once you actually start finding the truth and the real deal about the vehicle, some dealerships won't give you back your deposit. Here, it's actually a legal requirement, and I'm in the business, and I had a dealership for a boat dealership, boat and four-wheelers and all the outdoor fun stuff. That dealership refused to give me back my deposit, so I lost $500. Now let's hope Porsche, with Porsche prices coming down, let's hope I get back that $5,000 deposit and actually I could go to court for it because it's $5,000, it'd be worth my time, but you might even be living in an area where it's actually legal to hold on to that deposit. So that's the problem with that I have with journalists just being 100% positive about a model that's just been announced. My first Ford Maverick video was to say, hey, there's going to be this new small truck coming out at Ford, and I talked about, what we could probably expect in regards to total weight, cabin size, bed size, total length. What I suspected was coming, that it'd be smaller than the Ranger, but it talked about bed size. I looked at some spy photos, tried to measure things out based on those spy photos. That was my first video. My second video was once we actually had the info, I was like, hey, here are some things we're going to love and possibly hate about the Ford Maverick. And I got a lot of heat for that because, every other journalist was saying this was going to be the best thing since sliced bread. But then, I wanted to point out some things that could be problematic. And then actually I made a video being like, hey, I'm sorry, because some of the things I thought could be problematic aren't problematic. It's about getting the right buyer for that truck. And there's a lot in regards. There's a lot that's great about the Ford Maverick, but nothing's ever perfect. No human is ever perfect, and when you try to say a product or a human is absolutely perfect, I think you actually turn off more people than you turn on, because all the reasonable people are going to say, like, I can't take this seriously. Nothing's ever perfect. I want to say to Jay's Aquatic Fun, your Maverick arrives this week. Congratulations. I'm convinced you're going to love it. There's so much positive with the truck, and I'd love for you to come back on the live and in the comment section. Give us like a list of 10 things that, 10 points on it that you like or dislike, or actually a mix of both. You're allowed to have all 10 be, I love this. It can be 10 things you love, or it can be a mix. But I like to put the real deal when models come out, and that's just not how journalists do it. They talk it up when it's new and the excitement's on the product. And then once it's been in everyone's mind, you're like, well, we can't do any more videos about how amazing this new model is. People are starting to they've spent hours watching videos, looking at photos. People know what the Ford Maverick, Ford Bronco, the new Honda Prelude, or the new RX-7 Mazda, people know what it is. So now what can we do? Well, let's make money trashing it. And then it goes to the other extreme. It goes to severely negative information. Now, traditionally, journalists really give Ford a hard time for recalls. And this really gets on my nerves, because what do I despise the most? Wasting my money. And how can companies waste your money? Well, look at a fantastic example. Companies can waste your money when they say you're the problem, not the product. Our Porsche 911 from 1999 to 2008, they're perfect. If it's a Boxster, it started in 1997, the IMS problem. They can just sit there and go, no, our product's perfect. 82-year-old with a blown motor at 10 or 15,000 miles, we're not going to pay for that. The 82-year-old clearly raced the Porsche 911 or Porsche Boxster too much. When in reality, it's unbelievably clear that it's the IMS bearing. And even though for certain model years, roughly, some say it's over 10% of the engines blew, Porsche never took responsibility and never put a lifelong warranty on that IMS bearing. Or that would have been one less expensive option, or to just every 911 and Boxster that got sold say, come back, we're going to swap that part for you. Well, that's what Ford does. Ford does a lot of recalls because they say, come on back, we're going to swap that part for you. So let's put a nice little background here that we can all be entertained. So I think it's great that Ford actually takes care of their customers. They're not willing to just tell you that you're an 83-year-old or 82-year-old who clearly drove their Porsche 911 or Boxster into the ground. You raced it, and that's why the motor blew at only 10, 20, 30, sometimes 50,000 miles. I really like it when a company actually takes responsibility for their product. Now, journalists, like everyone, try to get by with the least amount of, make as much money with the least amount of work. And they want to make money. And it doesn't make for a very exciting story. You know, it makes for a much more exciting story to say, don't buy Ford because look at all these recalls. They're the king of recalls. 2023, I won't be surprised if we crack the 100 recalls total at Ford. It will affect millions of people. It's going to affect over 5 million owners. That's Ford taking responsibility for the product, like Porsche should have for their IMS bearing, like Toyota should have for certain products. I've had certain Toyotas that are just, it's like, and again, the Toyota MR2 needs an alternator again. I'm not even at 100,000 kilometers. GM should put a lifetime warranty on their AC unit because they always seem to break either right near the end or right after the end of the warranty, but they don't. So I like companies that I think as an owner, you might be a little annoyed if you have to go to the dealership a few times, but just plan on doing your recall with your oil change. Ford will have recalls. They have recalls for seatbelt chimes. They have recalls for, on the Ford Maverick, we had recalls for an airbag that ever so slightly overinflated. So we've got recalls for just about everything. And it doesn't mean that the company's garbage. It doesn't mean that the company's bad. It's something to know before purchasing. Some companies will, have really Honda Civics. For so many years, the paint is just horrible. The clear coat just peels off and then your paint fades and it looks like crap. Is Honda Civic telling all the owners, you know what? We painted them all poorly. If it happens to you, doesn't matter your mileage. We used the wrong paint or the wrong paint process from the beginning. That's so unbelievably obvious. And hopefully Honda doesn't sue people who point out some pretty obvious things, because they're still on, as far as I know, they haven't sat back and said, you know what, we painted all those Honda Civics wrong. So even if the car is 7 years old, you've lost some of your clear coat, come on back. That's our problem, because it is their problem, in my opinion. So Honda, don't sue me. Don't be little crybabies and sue. Certain years of Teslas had paint problems or fitment problems. Well, I like companies that do recalls, and Ford does a lot of recalls for a lot of really minor things too that they could probably just ignore. Now, when it comes to whether customers like them, well, customers have loved their Ford Bronco and Ford Maverick if and when they actually take possession of them. But of course, that made for a slew and a small army of upset people, and journalists, of course, will say, you know what, we've got a story we can tell here. We've got people who are upset. Let's build a story and let's make it, really an attack story. So I like to try to be a little bit more on the positive side when possible, and obviously when the data dictates that I should not be positive, I point it out. Now, we've got some awards that have gone down at Ford. Many awards, of course. It's been very popular, the Ford Maverick. So the Ford Maverick here, we've got trucks. We don't have any rating yet from Motor Trend on the new Ford Ranger, but we already know that comes with a great transmission. It comes with a very reliable, quality 2.3 liter engine, tons of power from that 4-cylinder. So I think the Ford Ranger has a solid chance in 2024. This time next year, we'll be, I think, finding out that it's Truck of the Year, unless the Ford Maverick still stays Truck of the Year. The Ford Bronco, Motor Trend puts an 8.1 out of 10 on it. I'd say based on how much owners love this vehicle and the fact that it considerably beats out its competitor. It came in to compete with the Jeep, and it definitely is better, a lot better in a lot of ways. Not rock crawling, but definitely better when it comes to being able to drive in a straight line and not punishing you through the steering wheel when you're driving over uneven, potholed roads. Ford Bronco does that so much better. The Ford Edge, I have to say, my experience with Ford Edges is it's one of Ford's most reliable products. Very, very well made. Maverick, made in Mexico, extremely well assembled. Huge kudos to the team out there. But you've got top ranked, the heavy duty truck. So that's the 250s, 350s. Ford Super Duties are top ranked. They're also incredible sellers. The Ford F-150 has been a bestseller in the full size truck segment for 40 some years, in Canada 50 some years. So the truck has been pretty unbeatable. The Ford Mustang, you can order a 2024 Ford Mustang and get it within a very reasonable amount of time. And that's been the best-selling sports car, the most popular sports car for decades and decades. But do expect that we might see the last V8 in one of these at the end of this decade. So 2028 for maybe stretched out to 2030, but this is the last, this series, the S650 series, if I recall correctly, is the last series of Mustang that's going to come with a V8, and that's pretty confirmed, pretty clear, it's been made pretty obvious. So if you want a collectible V8, well, you're probably not going to be able to get a 2024 Shelby. They're saving those Shelby GT350 engines. They're saving those for the F-150 Raptor R and letting all the new excitement for the new model go to the new Mustang. But we're going to start probably seeing a GT500, a Shelby GT500 come 2025 or 2026. That would be a great model to collect. Or the last year they produced these, make sure, even if the 5-liter, the standard 5-liter is incredible, 480 horsepower, you will not be disappointed. One of the best sounding V8s you can get on the market. Now, Motor Trend puts the 2024 Ford Mustang as the #1 sports car when it comes to performance, and it is a value that can't be beat, and it's performance that's very difficult to be beat. It's fun to drive. Just remember, if you're trying to drive at like a racer, 10 out of 10 on the danger level, if you've turned off your traction control, keep in mind, when you let go of the accelerator and the tires stop spinning, it will launch you in whatever direction you're pointed in. And that's the simple reason why people hit crowds or drive into the other intersection when they're leaving. All these videos from leaving a car meet and Mustangs causing all sorts of mayhem. Just don't turn off the technology that keeps you in a straight line. The stability control, leave it on, because those tires grip into the pavement and launch you in the direction when you let go of the gas pedal. And so many people let go of the gas pedal once the vehicle starts to slide too much. You got to kind of just control your sliding and keep sliding, because if you let go of the accelerator pedal, you're going to get launched. Or let it go once you're in a straight line, not when you're facing the crowd or facing oncoming traffic. Now, #1 compact truck, the Ford Maverick. This is by Motor Trend, but so many journals have put the Ford Maverick as a #1 pick. I agree completely. Talked about it when we were talking about the Ford Maverick. So I won't talk there's no need to talk more on the subject. The Maverick is an incredible truck, and probably whether you get it as a front-wheel drive hybrid now, you'll probably have to order that. Very hard to get your hands on one, and it's going to be so much harder to get your hands on an all-wheel drive hybrid, probably going to get announced and available for 2025, but the waiting list for that will be very, very long. The Bronco Sport Heritage, I think, is a great SUV. Love how it looks. So Lawrence, congratulations on that. We've got one as a courtesy. Imagine our dealership put Bronco Sport Heritage as a courtesy vehicle. So clients actually get to drive that sometimes, and they're usually pretty happy with that. Yeah, great question, Arcubo. I don't have anything confirmed, because guess what? The all-wheel drive hybrid Maverick still isn't confirmed. Nothing's official, but I can tell you that from pretty much day one, it was already always in the plans to hopefully try to get that ready. It was planned to be ready for 2025. It doesn't mean it will be ready for 2025, but it was part of those original plans, and you could say that's like a to-do list, a hope list, because honestly, men, when your wife makes you the to-do list, how many of you every single week get it done right on time, the entire list? Let's not expect Ford, and this is they never publicly said it was on their to-do list. So really inside information. So these aren't guarantees. I can just guarantee you that there is a lot of talk behind an all-wheel drive all-wheel drive hybrid Maverick. There's talk, but there's no guarantees yet. But what I can tell you is, if we consider the all-wheel drive unit to be something that weighs between 200 to 300 pounds with added moving parts to turn those back wheels, what can we expect for increased miles per gallon? Well, compare a front-wheel drive EcoBoost to an all-wheel drive EcoBoost, and there's your answer. That, let's say, 1.5 miles per gallon difference, or 1 mile per gallon, I'd say probably about 1 liter per 100 kilometers to 1.5 liters per 100 kilometers. That's going to be about the cost for having the extra power going to those back wheels. So you've got 200 to 300 pounds turning, you've got friction and whatnot. So that's what you'll have to contend with. So Ford winning lots of sales. The trucks have been top sellers for decades now. The F-150 is incredible. It deserves to win all sorts of awards. It doesn't rust. I take on trade 4 or 5-year-old GMs and Dodges, and yes, sometimes after only 5 years, the GM has rust, starting in the fenders and on the cab. I've taken on Ram 1500s that, I've taken on even as new as a 2019. And the owner put air suspension on the back, balloons as we call them, air suspension. And that made it that the shocks absorbed less. The balloons were stiff and absorbed less than normally the suspension would. And as a result, because they're blown up for heavy weight, as a result, the frame absorbed a lot more than usual. And, well, we've got crooked frames. So, Randy, yes. Miles per gallon are so important. I used to say that a lot back at the beginning of this channel. Like, I don't think that was now about 3 years ago. I talked a lot about miles per gallon because that's always been really important to me. And I might still prefer, I don't know, I might prefer the 2019 Ford Raptor, F-150 Raptor that I had over my Lightning. We'll get to that. So lots of awards for Ford, lots of recalls. Owners generally love their Fords. Ford has a high rate of reselling vehicles to the people that bought them. Sales are going very well at Ford. Now, I think generally in the whole market, my viewpoint is we're starting to see auto sales numbers that kind of indicate a bit of a recession, because while overall the market sold about 10% more vehicles this year than last year, there's so many more vehicles available in 2023 than there were in 2022. So many more vehicles. Millions of more vehicles. Let's say inventory went up by, well, it's hard to say because some dealers had 10 new vehicles available and now there's 110 vehicles. So you really say there's 10 times more inventory? I'd say it's almost easier to kind of look at production. because now vehicles come in and go in as inventory instead of already being sold to a customer. So production has gone up by so many times more than the 10% that auto sales went up. Production must be up about 40%, and you've got auto sales up 10%. So and if you compare those numbers to, the last 20 years, these aren't the best